All right. So once again, thank you very much for the coming and joining us for our new features webinar. We've got some really cool things to talk about today. As always, I'm Tim Cruz. I am the Vice President of Operations for Suez and responsible for the eRIS product. And I'm going to turn it over to John Clifford, our development team director. And John is the person, and along with his team, that developed most of these new features. So take it away, John.
Perfect. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm going to share my screen first and foremost before I dive into it. We can see the slide, right? The what's new in your slide. Just confirm that, get it out of the way. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. So today there's kind of broke stuff up into about 4 different kind of topics or groupings that we're going to talk about a few things. The first one being some new logbook features, realistically some more logbook data entry form and even reporting workflow centric features that we've added in the last little while. The second group is some tag query improvements, data query changes that we've made to improve some rounding, also just some chart visibility. And one that I think has been around for a while, but Tim thought it would be good to just bring it up again too, is just some table summaries that we can use actually in the tag query. Another section is calculations, kind of a much asked for feature, especially as a developer myself. I can understand the value in some of the autocomplete and the type ahead functionality that we've now added to our calculation editor. So just to help with some of those methods that we may or may not know about. So we'll get into that. Another option or another grouping is actually authentication. This is something that I don't know if people haven't asked for just because we haven't really had it in a while, but we'll dive into some SSO and some single sign-on, as that seems to be a bigger trend of the industry is moving into. One less password to remember, one less login screen to have to go through, and just something new that we've added into eRIS just this past month, actually. So we'll start with the logbook, and actually, more realistically, I'm going to start with just a form feature on its own, because I realized after the fact that this is its own feature that we haven't talked about, is actually the ability to export a data entry form into a PDF form. So I just have a very basic demo form that I have here, just 3 typical fields. They're just 3 values saved at midnight. Nothing crazy special about this form, but there's this new export button at the top here. And if you actually click it, what happens is you can actually get a PDF copy of that data entry form laid out just in a very similar manner to how the form is laid out on the page. Just something you can do to actually export the form right from that screen to share the form, maybe in a bit of an easier format into a PDF. So this feature actually kind of is what broke ground into the next feature. And I'm going to try and just move my window down to get underneath the WebEx screen share. So I'll just start with that because this is something that's kind of cool just for sharing data entry forms. But the first feature that we can go over that I have listed here is this concept of linking data entry form and logbook entries. Something a few people have asked for in the past, and we haven't really come up with maybe the best or strongest linking between the 2 concepts and 2 features within eRIS, is how to link data entry form data or just a data entry form with a logbook entry. So using this new PDF export, you can actually, there's a new button at the top here called link to logbook. This one actually is already linked, so it's green. So I'll go to one for today, and I'll just put some data in here to show it off. Just save this data entry form. There's this new button called link to logbook. And what this is going to do is actually take a PDF of this data entry form and attach it to a logbook entry over on our logbook. It's actually going to reject me at first because I do not have a shift logged for that logbook on that date. So the data entry form is actually going to restrict access to the logbook as long as following the same kind of procedures as regular shift entries are in the logbook. So I can actually go ahead and add myself in here. I'll add myself to the shift for today. And now I can create entries. I can go back to my data entry form. Just restart this. I can come up with October 10th. Yep. Now I can link. Now I actually get the dialog to actually be able to create a logbook entry. So creating logbook entry link, this data entry form. And you can also pick from a pre-configured list of labels from that logbook itself. So this is a subset of all the labels available. And I will choose to link. And now I get a nice little green bubble for my link to logbook. If I actually click that button now, I can't link it again, but it does list off what this form instance is linked to on the logbook. So if I hop back over to my logbook and I refresh the entries page, I have a new entry here created by me, creating logbook entry link with this data entry form. You can see the label that I have selected here. But you also notice there is a new icon that appears with this entry in the form of a little page. And if I click that, I actually open up the data entry form. And you'll notice it's the same PDF export right here so that they can do the form. So now operators from within the logbook can actually view data from a data entry form without it being this big, massive blob of an entry. It's actually just an attached PDF. And for those of you who know, previously you could actually make entries, but they were restricted to just comments. So you'd actually make a comment on a data entry field data point, and it would create an entry in the logbook for just that data value or that field value. So this kind of gives you a little bit more of an ability to do this for the whole form. And I just saw the question come through. This is only data entry forms version 2, this linking capability. It's really easy to enable. It's in the same location as general link logbook. There's a yes, and then there's just this new option for allow form link to logbook. And it just kind of uses the same options here that you previously have for commenting. So that is the first new feature. If anyone has any questions about this linking or the logbooks and the forms. The text is not searchable, Gary, from this form. Not at this time. I don't know, Tim, if you have to let people talk, but Don has a question.
Could you have so say an operator puts in an entry and it's above a quality target. Can you have a pop-up box saying that they have to add a logbook because of it? Or is it just the only way to do it is they have to physically click the button?
Yeah, this time it's just you have to physically link it to logbook.
Okay.
So actually creating a comment based off of a high value would be, I don't know if someone from my team can correct me here. I don't know if there's that feature right now in data entry forms. That feature is available in data entry sheets. Data entry sheets prompts you for a comment, but that is not, it's not logbook linkable. Just you create a comment to that data point if it reaches a certain threshold.
Okay, thanks.
You can, though, in the data entry form, you can set notification specifications. So when you set up the form, you could, it's called the actions tab. Go to actions. So you can set an action for a particular field, and then you can get a less than or greater than or whatever you want to trigger on, and you can link that to a constant, or you can put it in a fixed value. And the action types currently right now are notification. What else can we do? Just
mark closed.
Yeah, mark closed. But notification will send a email to a group of people that value either was exceeded or whatever. It'll send you an email that says that if it was less than, that something happened below that, or if it was greater than, something happened above that, and it'll send that email out. Maybe we can look to enhance this to say notify, pop up and let person link it to the logbook if that's enabled. Maybe we can add that action type. But right now that doesn't exist, but you can trigger a notification. Just thought we'd mention that.
That's good.
Thanks.
I'm going to let Brian answer. Brian's kind of answering all the chat questions, so I'll go with that for now. The next feature is something else for logbooks. It's just a logbook export. So right now, typically everyone is they have to design their own report, and it's a bit of a process to get that logbook report set up. And you have to run that export from the reporting engine. So something new we've added by client request feature is the ability to export directly from a logbook. So I'll hop back over to the exact same logbook I've been using. Just make sure I got the latest entries. You may notice this already, but there's a down arrow or an export button that appears here at this top part of the row. When you click this, it actually prompts you with the dialog just a few little more options that you may or may not want, to include history, to use the current filters. So if you have label set or an entry text searched or an operator search, it's going to take those filters as well. And then from here, you can actually just hit export, and you're going to notice you get very similar messages that you would from Report Viewer. It actually runs a report and exports those logbook entries in a very similar looking from the logbook reports. So this report, there's a basic report that Brian has developed, Brian and the support team have developed that can be used here. This is also customizable. So if you want your report to have your company logo on this PDF, or maybe have things show up with different title bars, this is not a hard-coded, hard-set report. This is just a default report, and this can obviously be customized just like any other report design in eRIS using BERT or Eclipse, or I guess you could use a report builder as well. I guess not report builder because it's a little more specific and custom. So if I come back here also, and if I just do a new label and I just filter down, so I only have entries with maintenance, and I do another export, I will select use current filters, and that will export. And now my export only has 2 entries. So this is also just an easier way to customize the export that you're dealing with, where Report Viewer, you were kind of stuck with all entries, or however the report was set up is what your export was going to look like from the Report Viewer. But here you have some more customizability, whatever that word would be, here to select different filters to include in your export. Obviously, this is a very limited logbook, the amount of entries that it has. It will always follow this date range. So if I do expand this date range, I will have more entries appear. I don't actually think there is any more entries in this logbook. No.
Yeah, John,
So,
you could go to another logbook though on the first page. If you click
yeah,
logbook there, that's our demo logbook, and that's got a
perfect.
whole bunch of entries, and you can show that one off then too if you want.
Yeah, so there is no filter, so I don't need to select that, but and here we go with, yeah, just a little bit more entries can appear. So the download button doesn't appear by default. It does have to get set up, which actually, when I was preparing for this demo, is something I realized that we can probably include in the sims to automatically set this up properly. It does require a report to actually be in the eRIS system, and you specify what report to use for this export. That's what allows us to make this export customizable per client if they do want to include different company logos or make a few minor changes. But there should be a way for during sim updates that we can have this happen automatically, and that way this download button can appear. It is also fairly new. I think it came out in this week's sim. This is like a brand spanking new feature. We've been working on it for a little bit, but it just got released. So
if you don't see it and you want help setting it up, reach out to support@erisdelivers.com, and Brian's support team can help you walk you through that. Might require you getting the latest sim, but then we can also get the report uploaded to you and configured, and then get you using it.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, there's Tim. Brian saying the version's 3.23. Great. Another one that we actually weren't sure if we've shown this yet, but we'll go over it again if we have. It's actually a logbook reporting workflow. This is a new feature that came out, I think, later last year. So it has been available for a few SIMs. You can actually see a small preview of it right here with this little dialog. But what I'm going to do is hop over to my reporting workflow. So what we're looking to solve here is logbook entries that can trigger workflows. So there is a workflow set up right here. Actually, I'll start with, what is it, Tim? Notify supervisors. There's just a very basic workflow set up here, and its workflow is just email to the group of supervisors. And for those who don't know workflows, this is kind of like a workflow editor here. This just allows you to kind of set up basic workflows, but that's a whole nother webinar. And so here, this is just a very basic workflow. And over here, we have in the My Tasks, we have a Notify Supervisors workflow. So this workflow isn't going to actually assign anything in the My Task portlet. It could, if you so choose, that logbook entries should trigger an actual workflow where users need to get involved in the My Tasks. And I believe that is the use case for the client who requested this feature. So the bread and butter of this is kind of label triggers. So you would select from a list of logbooks that you want this reporting workflow or this My Tasks to apply to. So here it's the default logbook, and the alert is, and the label that would be used would be called Alert Notify Supervisors. So anytime this label is used on an entry, it is going to trigger a workflow. If I come over to this logbook.
John, will you go back and just quickly hit the add button so people will see that there's a new option too when you're adding a new My Task template, that the option is now logbook. So that is the way in which you set it up. So you have to make sure that you select logbook, and then that label triggers will show up in your workflow template editor.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you can see the type down here would be logbook as opposed to report tag or alarm or anything like that. So if I go back to this logbook and I can find my alert, my label here, Alert Notify Supervisors, this will trigger a workflow. And if I create this entry, the first thing I do is I get a pop-up just so the user is aware that you are going to be triggering a workflow with this based off the label that you've used. And if I hit, so adding new labels to your entry will start a workflow. So I'll hit confirm. So the entry gets created as normal, but once the reporting workflow has been created, the portlet will refresh and you will see this little 3-bullet marker here. Selecting this does bring up the same kind of workflow details that you would see in the My Task portlet, where it's going to show you the summary of the workflow in its state. Tim and I did this earlier, and he did get the email here. So because Tim is in that supervisors group that we set up, he does get this email that he forwarded, and it just kind of shows some status and like what happened here. And you can see that my entry from previously making a new entry for what's new in eRIS is kind of what shows up in the topic here. So this allows your logbook to trigger workflows automatically based off of labels. And this, actually, because there's more to this, if I go into the logbook editor, so this is the default logbook for Tim. There's another toggle here that is part of this feature as well. It's called Allow Manual Workflows. And with this option, when it's disabled, we couldn't see it. And this option does not have any weight on the automatic label triggers. So what we just saw is like an automatic label trigger for a workflow. This toggle here does not affect that. That is always enabled if it's been set up in the reporting workflow. But if I do enable this, I'm actually just going to filter up. So with this enabled, I can select what menu workflows are allowed to be triggered from a logbook entry. So if I hit save, I can show you what I'm talking about. Go over to logbook, I'll refresh. Now each of these entries has a new option called start a workflow. So just because a label was used that doesn't automatically trigger a workflow, you can still go back to an entry and allow the operator to start a workflow from a entry. So if they've created an entry, and maybe it shouldn't be an automatic workflow, but they've determined that there should be some sort of workflow associated with this entry, they can also just trigger it manually after the fact. And that's going to create a workflow, and what the page should do is refresh, and we should see a new bullet point. I don't even remember what entry I used, but they would all have options here. And
so this example that John's using of notify supervisors is kind of it's a really basic workflow that has no steps to it. It's just a notification workflow. But think of this as an opportunity to use one of our multi-stage workflows. So maybe there's, a calibration that needs to be done. So you could, from this, if you did a, need calibration label, you could automatically trigger the maintenance team to be notified that or somebody to go out, and the calibration team to go do the calibration. There could be a confirmation that the calibration is complete, which would be a second stage of the workflow that team would then have to go into my tasks to complete when they're done, so that there'd be a notification back to the operators to say, yep, the calibration is done. So there's a whole feedback loop that could be built using a multi-stage workflow.
mm-hmm.
We do have quick start guides that explain workflows and how to set them all up. So Brian put the support email address, but they are available at our document site. If you don't know where our document site is, email support and we'll get you hooked up with our document site.
Any questions from anyone on reporting workflow or even the logbook export? Okay, I'll move right on into tag plus rounding. Up until this feature, which I believe was a later last year feature as well, eRIS always used half even rounding, and it still uses that by default. Is half even when any display scale is applied to tag data less than whatever's configured on the tag spec. By default, it's 8, but it can be set up differently per tag and per provider. So we have a little bit more flexibility on this now using our tag plus. So if I hop over to a tag plus editor, I have a few rules set up here, and I'll just pick my TO1 tag, ETTO1. So I'm applying this tag plus. Again, if you want more in-depth information on the tag plus, it's going to be in the same kind of documentation and support that eRIS delivers. There's a rounding tab that's been added, and rounding can be applied to a certain tag plus set or a list of tags. In my case, any tag inside the ET provider that matches this pattern is going to have this tag plus applied, which means it's going to have this rounding. So I can say I only want this rounding to happen between these 2 months. Otherwise, it doesn't need to happen. And there's a little bit more rounding modes than just what we've had before, which was half down or half even, sorry. Now we have ceiling, floor, down, up, half down, half even, half up. I don't know if we have a glossary of what exactly each of these modes do, because I'm not sure what difference between ceiling and up, but we can make sure that that's documented somewhere. So in this case, I have one for my tag TO1 for floor. I believe I have another one that rounds it for all the modes to ceiling. And then I also have on my TO2 tag, average and first, and then I use ceiling. However, this rule here that gets applied to average has a date range between April 3rd and April 5th. And that's going to be important when I hop over here to my data query. Again, like I said, I have 3 tags here, ETT01, ETT02, and ETT03. They all contain the exact same data set that I just copied over to 3 tags, but I have different rounding modes applied. So here, my ET01 average, I use the floor mode, and you can see that from the first tag spec that I looked at here, that I'm using floor on average TO1s. My data query, so floor. So my initial value, you can see when I hover over it, it got rounded down just to 45555. So because the decimal place is 0.4, it just goes down to 4555. But when I apply the ceiling rounding mode to it, it does actually go up to 4556. The initial value pop-up should be appearing. That would be something else to look at. And then you can see the same here. My 1 turns into a 2. You can see the original value always over here. I left this raw. And my 5 turns into a 6, my 6 into a 7, so on and so forth. They all get rounded up to a ceiling. The second list I have here, and I did use ceiling again for this, but my rounding only happens between April 3rd and 5th. And you can see that in the tag plus, that my average tag for ETO2 only has rounding between April 3rd to, what was it, April 3rd to April 3rd to 5th, I believe. April 3 to 5. Otherwise, yeah, the ceiling only gets applied here. So this doesn't go up to 2, and this doesn't go up to 4556 because it's not in the date range. However, here my value of 5.7 does go to 6, just like it does here for first. This ceiling is always applied for this mode. So you can see my tags that are only going, that are matching here are actually within that date range. 6, 7, and 3, 4, and 5. The dates are going up to match. And I've just left this raw always to see that. So there's some flexibility now on what rounding mode you use for what tags, during what times, and for what modes even. And that's all configured with the Tag Plus editor that you can choose. I'm just giving more options to how this data should be rounded if you don't want to use the half even rounding. Does anyone have any questions on rounding and the new rounding features that they want to ask? I know the chat's been going off that Brian's been answering, but. All right. Move on to another new feature that is also in the data query, is chart table visibility. This is just a new option to toggle the visibility of tag in, of tag whether or not it's in your table and or chart. So for this, there's another query I'm going to use called energy consumption. First, before we actually preview it, we're going to go in and edit it. So here I just have a basic tag for energy consumption, and then there's also just a max tag, which is a constant. If I open this up, there's 2 new options here: visible on chart, and there's true or false. By default, these are all going to be true because that's how everything has been working up to this date. But you can see that I've selected that this constant does not appear in my table. So I don't want to see this constant in my table. I only want to see it in my chart when I run this. And my first tag is actually visible in both locations. They're both true. So I save and run this. You can see in my chart, in my tag query here, I actually have 2 series up here. I can see my constant at the top, this thick blue line, and then I have my regular tag down here. But in my table, I actually don't see the constant. So I'm only seeing the energy consumption. So this allows for a little bit more control over your display if you want to see certain tags only in your chart and not in your table. You can also flip this. I want to see my constant also in the chart. but I actually don't want to see my tag. Sorry, Tim, if I'm going to screw up any of your future demos.
No worries, John. I know where to find you.
So now we've actually, have we flipped this? Well, now the energy consumption is here, but see how it's there, but it's almost not there. It's actually just not selected. So if I select this now, I can show it, but by default, it does not show on the first appearance in the chart. We can put this back. True and true. True.
Yeah, I don't think you saved the first time, dude. You hit exit, so it's not, you're not
Did I
saving.
hit X?
Yeah.
Well, now we have
Definitely.
nothing on the chart, but we have everything in the table. So if
I'll
you know how
fix
to,
it.
if you know how to click save buttons, you're better off than me, and you can have the chart saved. Okay, so another feature that's actually already displayed here is table summaries. This is a feature that's been around for a little bit, but just want to kind of highlight it today. You'll see at the bottom, we actually have a summary of the two columns here, an average and a minimum. So with this ability, we can actually see what's beyond having to create another tag series for this chart or this table. You can actually just get an average of your, in this case, average of your averages to display at the bottom. This can be done, this is done for every column. If I go into edit the data query, you can see my list of tags here. I can edit this. No, I don't want to do tags. It's actually a table option, sorry. And there's a summary footer option that's selected. So sorry if again I did that too quick, it's just in table options. Here you can pick between average, minimum, maximum, and total. Now if I say that and run this query, so here now I have much more of a overall summary of the data that's put in front of us. So I have the minimum value, I have the maximum value as high as it goes. So it looks like it's 3.1, then the average of the averages, and then just a total. So just some more summarization tools that you can use inside the data query table to present a different kind of summary. Of course, for a constant, all these values are the same because a constant is always the same.
And John, since you're here on data query, that little eyeball, I don't know if everybody knows to use that as well, or not the eyeball, but the being able to show the result. There you go, that one. Edit column displays. So I don't know if anybody realized, but you can show quality, you can show gaps, you can show the source. They are all off by default, but you used to have to go into the query and edit each one of those individually, or you'd have to go to the table options and turn those on. Now you can do that with the little pencil. So you can show those and turn them on or off without it. And yeah, so it's much easier now to do without having to go into the query. They don't save permanently, so if you turn them on here, it's going to revert back to the whatever was set as the option of the query when it was last saved. But if you're looking for gaps or you want to know the tag description and they're not on by default in the query, you can at least turn it on without having to go into the query and edit it. That was something that was added a long time ago too, but probably before we did new features, and so a lot of people may not even know that it exists.
Cool. Well, I'll move on to another one that I think will be very exciting for some people. Is some new coding assists for the calc editor. I'm going to go and bring up my calculation portlet. Looks like I already have one started here. So I just have a demo what's new in eRIS, calc. I just have one variable right now. Might as well just add a couple of constants though. And we can even add an output tag. We can use. So over in the edit test, this is still available, but there is this assist along the side that shows you a list of kind of methods that you can use as you write your calc. But what's new and has been added is a little bit of type ahead. So as you code and as you kind of create your calculations, we are now presenting you what I would say is a more in-depth list of options and features you can use. So if I type the word, context, I'm going to start getting that pop. This message pops up. And you can't see this, but I'm just going to hit the enter key, and it's actually just going to complete that for me. So even if I just do C, I can hit enter. I don't have to type the whole word context. For those of you who don't want to type the extra 7 characters, I know I don't. And then as soon as I hit period, I get another pop-up that kind of presents to me a list of the options I can do with context. And it's a pretty big list, and it's probably bigger than, well, I know it is bigger than the list that pops up along the side. But it does have some description on what each of these methods actually do. You can scroll through that whole list. Some of them are actually probably new methods that haven't added, that are not included on the sidebar, that you can use. So, I mean, one of the common ones is just trace, so that you can put something to the log for debugging. And if you just hit enter on that, it'll autofill. Then you just need to kind of come in here and say, this is my message. You can enter, and I have a few variables here. So if I just start typing my tag, is it called my tag? Yeah, where is it popping up? Popping up earlier.
I think you typed a period.
Did I?
Or you typed a comma. That's why.
Actually, I think I might have an error on the page. Let me actually close this. It worked when I showed you guys earlier.
Yep, live demos, man. Gotta love them.
It's new in. Sometimes it does take a second, just as it builds the library. Oh, see, the inputs are actually not even added properly. My tag. This is probably because I created this 4 hours ago and let my session run dry.
That's what happened.
That'll make sense if this actually works when I'm done, but. And we'll just go open. I'm not sure why that works. I'm going to try one more thing. There we go. Must be a constant, but so my variable my tag, as I was trying to show, if I just start typing my tag, I can actually hit period here, and I have a whole bunch of options presented to me that relate to that tag input. So the clone, so there's actually you'll see the clone method is here twice. That's because either form is syntactically correct. So you can use just .clone and it will clone it, or you can use .clone bracket bracket. This is just because of the language we're using for our calcs called MVEL. Both are technically supported. So in some cases, you'll see the same method twice, and the second time it has bracket bracket around it. That's okay. That's normal. That's just because some people don't put the bracket bracket. I do as the force of habit. I type the extra 2 characters, but you don't have to. But the list goes on and on. I mean, we can go through the whole list, but we'll be here the rest of the day for all these options. But you can just get a general idea. These are some of the options that are available to you with the tag output. And then also with my out tag, I get different options here to use. Some of them are the same, but different options can be set. There's also some baked in options, so you can actually use the math utility, and it pops up options on how you can get an absolute number, maximum value between two, which one's the max, get the lesser of two values. If it's a float, this list is a bit long, but the other one that is here should be something called XML dates. There's actually a class that we use on the development team that's technically exposed in the calculation, that you can actually now kind of visibly see, and it has some options for dealing with some of the dates that we use in eRIS and these calcs. So if you want to get now, for a certain time zone, if you want to parse a date, clone dates, these options are just kind of showing now. So hopefully this assists or empowers the user to have a easier time creating calculations. These methods can be updated and will be continuously modified if they're changed or if they're added. These pop-ups will improve, and this list should only get longer. That's the only type of head we have right now. It doesn't go into anything crazy with if statements. That would be something more down the road, but we just thought the biggest confusion with coding in our world is what methods do we allow you to use? And so we wanted to make sure that that was documented in a type ahead or autocomplete feature.
There is a quick question. Do you know if we have a document that describes the methods that are available? Do we have that anywhere? I know there used to be a document somewhere that was.
Yeah, the only thing right now is this sidebar. However, I think we could create a way to export that list into a more formed document. So that would be something that we can take away, so that you would have maybe a PDF form of these methods.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so something to improve on. Yeah.
When we understand our calc engine is not for the faint of heart, so and we have on our roadmap a much easier to use calc tool that we're looking at developing, but probably won't be out until we release version 4.
A few things with this assist that I should mention as well. If it does kind of irritate you or get in the way of what you're doing, there is options to turn it off completely so it doesn't appear at all. There's also an option called manual. So auto type ahead will always suggest methods. When it's manual, code hints will only appear when control space is used, and off is no code assist, like you're never going to see it. So if I actually switch to manual here, I come back. If I'm typing my tag, you can see, nothing shows up. But the moment I hit control space, I get that option, and I can do the same here. So if you're pretty confident what you're doing and this pop-up is just getting annoying to you, you can actually flip it off. And if you do get confused, then you can just always do control space. So if I type new data equals new data, it doesn't appear until I hit control space. So a little bit of flexibility there if you think that this might just be an annoyance for you as you're coding, and you want to see the code that's underneath it. You can turn it off until you hit control space. Awesome. All right, this rounds us out to the last feature that I have on my list to talk about today, and it's called single sign-on and SSO. So kind of a high overview here is, I think not most, but some clients use LDAP as the authentication for eRIS. So eRIS actually connects to an external LDAP. So your passwords are kind of in sync across the business. So your operators or users aren't using custom Liferay or custom eRIS logins, I should say. Custom eRIS logins, they're actually using the exact same login they would use for their Outlook and all their other business applications. So we've always been able to support LDAP. What we haven't had is a single sign-on. And in the case that we actually built this for was for the Azure kind of world and the Microsoft world. Having if you sign into your Office 365 account online, you kind of sign in once, and then if you go to Outlook or Teams, you're already signed in on the next page. So tying life right into that single sign-on world was the request. Uses something called SAML right now for the first one that we've built, Security Assertion Markup Language. It's more of a term once your IT kind of gets involved to allow the single sign-on and eRIS to be plugged in. To actually enable this, IT would have to be involved because they have to set up a special application for eRIS itself. So, but this kind of allows one less place, one less login screen for operators to go to sign in, because they can just automatically be signed into eRIS if they're signed into their Office account online. So if I'll close all my other tabs. I don't need them again. Gonna leave. I'm actually gonna sign out. So in this case here, I didn't want to screw up the normal sign-in page. So I actually have a different public page here called SSO. It's called eRIS SSO. This portlet or this option here can be obviously put on the main landing screen of eRIS. But if I click login here, you'll notice there's no username and password. If I just hit login, it's actually going to bring me to a Microsoft login authentication portal screen. I've set up my own free for the year Azure tenant or Azure login to use. So I'm actually going to pick this user called admin at John Clifford. And I'm going to sign in. I can say yes to signing in. And now I'm signed in. And I didn't have to enter a password. My browser's already known this is me as a user. And now I'm in as eRIS administrator. If I actually sign out again, I go back to the SSO page. I hit login. It actually just brings me in. There is actually no login at all associated with this. So what we have also in this portlet here, actually, I'll sign back in. I'll go back out to the public page to edit this portlet. You can actually just auto redirect, yes or no. And for this case, I will say yes. Now I'll sign out. And so now the moment I go to this SSO page, I automatically get redirected and boom, I'm signed in. And that's it. I don't have to do anything else because I've already signed into my Microsoft account in this browser, and Microsoft accepts that authentication and tells eRIS, yes, this is a user, and we verify that that payload is accurate, and we sign them right in to the account. So if anyone is looking for a single sign-on integration with eRIS, it is available now. It's been tested obviously with Microsoft and Azure. I've tested it with something called Auth0, but both of them use the exact same framework and same workflow to authenticate the login. So we did do SAML, but obviously open to using other single sign-on protocols and logins if people are using different, what would be called an identity provider. In this case, Microsoft is the identity provider to log in. It's kind of a quick thing to demo because it only takes 2 seconds, but it does help if you're moving to a passwordless or one sign-on across the entire business suite of applications for operators.
Yeah. Thanks, John. That's really good. Yeah. It's a new feature and we wanted to show it to people, and yeah, it does require IT configuration, so it's not something that you would probably, unless you are good friends with the IT department, would be able to configure. But yeah, it is now available, and it is very handy. Saves you one less password to have to type in.
Mm-hmm.
And that is our presentation for today. Are there any questions, comments, concerns from anyone before we sign off? As always, this will be posted to our YouTube channel. So go to YouTube and search eRIS videos and you'll find us. There's also a link to the documents page. Brian just put up a whole bunch of things up on the chat. So the link to the documents page was there. if you just go to the landing page of the document page, you can go right to our YouTube channel, and this video will be up as soon as we can download it and get it up there. So thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.